As the conflict between Ukraine and Russia enters its fourth year, significant developments have emerged that could shape the future trajectory of the war and international diplomatic relations. On February 25, 2025, Ukraine's parliament reaffirmed President Volodymyr Zelensky's legitimacy amid growing scrutiny from both the United States and Russia regarding his legal standing as the leader of Ukraine. This resolution, aimed at solidifying domestic support and countering external pressures, reflects ongoing tensions and the complexities of governance in a time of war. The geopolitical landscape has further complicated with Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic's recent apology for his country's support of a resolution endorsing Ukraine's territorial integrity. This turn of events highlights the delicate balance Serbia must maintain amid its ties to Russia and the increasing demands for clarity from the international community regarding its stance on the Ukraine conflict. Simultaneously, the United States has found itself at odds with its European allies at the United Nations. On February 24, the U.S. rejected proposed resolutions that explicitly blamed Russia for its invasion, a move that has drawn criticism and raised concerns about the cohesion of Western support for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron remains optimistic, suggesting that a truce could be achieved soon, yet he cautioned that any peace agreement must not equate to Ukraine's surrender. In a notable shift, Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed openness to European involvement in peace talks, a statement that contrasts with previous hardline stances. U.S. President Donald Trump has posited that Putin is amenable to the idea of European peacekeepers in Ukraine, though skepticism persists regarding the practicality and implications of such a force. As Ukraine commemorates 3 years since the onset of Russia's full-scale invasion, Zelenskyy has lauded the heroism of his compatriots, which resonates with the sentiments of foreign leaders who gathered in Kyiv to express solidarity. The anniversary serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring conflict, with the Ukrainian military reportedly having regained over 50% of the territory lost since the invasion's start, according to Commander-in-Chief General Oleksandr Syrsky. However, the war's toll extends beyond the battlefield. A mental health crisis is emerging among Ukrainian soldiers, with hospitals overwhelmed by cases of anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Reports indicate that these hidden wounds may linger for decades, underscoring the long-term consequences of sustained warfare on a population already facing significant trauma. On the economic front, Russia faces mounting challenges as inflation soared to 9.5% in 2024, driven by military expenditures and labor shortages. The Russian economy, while resilient in some aspects, is showing signs of strain that could hinder its ability to sustain military operations. Polling data indicates a shift in public sentiment, with many Russians beginning to feel the economic repercussions of the war, leading to calls for prioritizing social spending over military investments. As the conflict persists, the prospect of a peace deal remains uncertain. The Kremlin continues to demand that any negotiations address its security concerns, including the prevention of Ukraine's NATO membership, while also insisting on the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from contested territories. These uncompromising positions complicate any potential resolution, leaving Ukraine and its allies wary of Russia's intentions. Looking ahead, the geopolitical chessboard is shifting with each diplomatic maneuver, military advance, and economic decision. As Zelenskyy continues to rally support for Ukraine's sovereignty and as Western nations grapple with their evolving roles, the future of Ukraine remains precariously poised between the aspirations of its leadership and the aggressive posturing of Russia. The ongoing dialogue among world leaders will be crucial in determining whether a path to peace can be forged or if the conflict will drag on, further entrenching the divides that have emerged in the wake of this war. As the conflict in Ukraine approaches its third anniversary, significant developments are unfolding that highlight the evolving landscape of military strategy and international relations. Recent discussions in Kyiv have underscored the urgency for Ukraine's European allies to bolster their support, particularly in enhancing drone warfare capabilities. This comes amid rising tensions and shifting political dynamics, especially with the upcoming meeting between UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and former US President Donald Trump, who has emphasized the need for stronger European security measures. In a press conference, Starmer announced a substantial increase in the UK's defence spending to 2.5% of its GDP by 2027, a decision he attributed to long-standing concerns about national security that have been exacerbated by the ongoing war in Ukraine. "It's true President Trump thinks we should do more and I agree with him," Starmer stated, reinforcing a sentiment that aligns the UK with US defence priorities. He acknowledged, however, that this decision was not made under pressure from the US but was a necessary evolution in response to the realities of a dangerous new era. This funding boost will necessitate cuts to the overseas development budget, which will drop from 0.5% to 0.3% of GDP, a decision met with criticism from humanitarian organizations. Charities have condemned the reduction, warning that it could diminish the UK's global influence and harm vulnerable populations worldwide. David Miliband, former Foreign Secretary and head of the International Rescue Committee, called the move a blow to Britain's proud reputation as a global humanitarian and development leader. As the UK recalibrates its defence strategy, European leaders are also stepping up their military commitments to Ukraine. On the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada announced a new military aid package, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen pledged significant financial support. These actions reflect a broader consensus among European nations about the necessity of sustained military assistance to Ukraine in the face of ongoing Russian aggression. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground remains precarious, with Russian forces continuing their aerial assaults across various regions, including Kyiv and Sumy, causing injuries and property damage. Ukrainian air defenses reported intercepting a significant number of Russian drones and missiles, highlighting the ongoing cat-and-mouse game between the two sides. The Ukrainian military's resilience, bolstered by Western support, has allowed it to reclaim over 50% of the territory occupied by Russian forces since the beginning of the invasion, according to Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief General Oleksandr Syrsky. However, the toll of the conflict is mounting. Recent reports indicate that Russian losses have been staggering, with estimates suggesting over 10,000 tanks and 21,000 armored vehicles destroyed. The economic impact of the war is also beginning to be felt within Russia, as public support for continued military engagement wanes amid rising economic hardships. Polls show a growing number of Russians are feeling the strain of the prolonged conflict, which could have implications for domestic stability and the Kremlin's ability to sustain its military efforts. As the international community watches these developments closely, the underlying tensions between Moscow and the West remain unresolved. The Kremlin's recent rejection of any ceasefire negotiations that do not include Ukraine's capitulation signals a hardening of positions that complicates the pathway to peace. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's insistence on addressing the root causes of the conflict suggests that Moscow is not ready to compromise on its objectives. Looking ahead, the coming weeks will be critical. Starmer's meeting with Trump may further shape the UK's role in European security, while the situation in Ukraine continues to evolve rapidly. The international community must remain vigilant and responsive to the shifting dynamics, as the stakes for Ukraine's sovereignty and regional stability are higher than ever. As military strategies adapt and alliances shift, the prospect of a sustainable resolution to the conflict remains uncertain. Underscoring the urgent need for continued support for Ukraine and a unified approach from its allies. In a geopolitical landscape reshaped by the recent U.S. presidential election, tensions are rising as China reassures Russia of its steadfast friendship amid a shifting alliance backdrop involving Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. With the world watching closely, both leaders appear poised to redefine their international relationships and strategies, particularly concerning the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. As Trump settles back into the White House, the implications for Russia are profound. Following 3 years of relentless warfare and international isolation, President Vladimir Putin has found new hope with the change in U.S. leadership. Trump's administration marks a significant pivot from the previous U.S. stance on Russia, characterized by robust support for Ukraine and a unified front with European allies. Now, as Trump expresses a desire for rapprochement with Russia, Many European nations are left questioning the U.S. commitment to their security. Max Bergman, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, articulated this shift, stating, "I think Putin sees real opportunity both to win the war in Ukraine effectively but also to sideline the U.S. not just from Ukraine but from Europe." This sentiment resonates with historical patterns, as Putin has long sought to re-establish Russian influence in Eastern Europe, particularly in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution. The current dynamics suggest that Putin may feel emboldened to advocate for a reconfiguration of NATO and further encroach on territories historically tied to Russia. Angela Stent, an expert on Russian affairs, highlighted the Kremlin's ambition. In Putin's view, it's the most powerful countries that should get to determine the rules of the road. This perspective could lead to a resurgence of Cold War-era negotiations and territorial claims, even as NATO expands closer to Russia's borders, with countries like Finland and Sweden joining the alliance. In the wake of Trump's election, reports indicate that arrangements for a potential summit between Trump and Putin are already in progress. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov remarked on the need for intensive preparatory work to normalize U.S.-Russia relations, hinting at a range of global issues to be discussed, with Ukraine being central to the agenda. Meanwhile, Trump has already indicated his intent to broker a ceasefire, a move that some analysts fear may sideline Ukrainian interests in favor of a bilateral agreement between the U.S. and Russia. The stakes are high, particularly concerning Ukraine's rich mineral resources. Recently, Putin offered access to both Russian and Ukrainian rare minerals, positioning Russia as a potential partner for the U.S. in resource extraction, a move that comes amid Trump's repeated calls for Ukraine to relinquish some of its resources in exchange for support. Ukrainian officials have expressed concerns about the implications of such negotiations, emphasizing the need for Kyiv's involvement in any discussions regarding its sovereignty and resources. Despite the apparent opportunities for Putin, challenges remain. The Russian military has suffered significant losses in the ongoing conflict, with estimates suggesting daily fatalities ranging from 1,000 to 1,500, while the economy is strained under high inflation and defense spending. As the political landscape shifts, both sides must navigate a complex web of alliances, public perception, and military realities. Public opinion in the U.S. remains largely skeptical of Putin, with a Pew Research Center poll indicating that over 80% of Americans view Russia negatively. Trump's administration must tread carefully, as any perceived concessions to Moscow could provoke backlash domestically, complicating the pursuit of a peaceful resolution to the conflict. As the world watches these developments unfold, the question of how the Trump-Putin relationship will reshape global politics looms large. In the coming weeks, the focus will likely intensify on the nature of U.S.-Russia negotiations and their potential impact on the ongoing war in Ukraine. The fragility of the situation underscores the need for careful diplomacy, particularly as both leaders seek to assert their interests on the global stage. The future of Ukraine, NATO, and U.S.-Russia relations hangs in the balance, with the potential for both significant breakthroughs and grave miscalculations. As the world marks the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the geopolitical landscape has drastically shifted, presenting new challenges for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Recent developments have deepened uncertainties regarding Ukraine's international support, particularly from the United States, as President Donald Trump's administration has pivoted towards a more conciliatory stance with Moscow. This shift has significant implications for Ukraine's ongoing struggle against Russian aggression, and it raises pressing questions about the future of U.S.-Ukrainian relations. Just days before the anniversary, Zelenskyy and his leadership team faced a pivotal moment. Ukraine's parliament reaffirmed Zelenskyy's legitimacy amidst an increasing sense of crisis, especially with the U.S. engaging in peace talks with Russia that excluded Ukrainian representatives. Political scientist Volodymyr Fesenko described this juncture as potentially the most acute crisis in U.S.-Ukraine relations, cautioning that it could lead to a strategic rapprochement between the U.S. and Russia at Ukraine's expense. In the worst case, this is a strategic turn of the US towards Russia, Fisenko stated, highlighting fears that previous partnerships with Europe and Ukraine could be fundamentally weakened. Zelensky's administration has been navigating these turbulent waters while attempting to maintain a semblance of cooperation with the new US leadership. Following a series of contentious exchanges, including Trump labeling Zelensky a dictator without elections, the Ukrainian president expressed a willingness to resign if it meant securing NATO membership for his country. If it means peace for Ukraine, I am ready, he asserted, although such a prospect appears increasingly distant, with Trump's administration advocating for a transactional approach to U.S. support. While the Biden administration had emphasized a nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine philosophy, the current administration seems to be pressuring Kyiv into concessions, including economic and territorial compromises. Trump's recent comments indicate a desire to recoup what he perceives as lost U.S. investments in Ukraine, further complicating the relationship. I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up, Trump stated, asserting that Ukraine should be held accountable for the financial aid provided over the years. Amidst this turmoil, Zelensky's administration is finding it challenging to strike a balance between pushing back against U.S. demands and maintaining a cooperative stance. A government source described the situation as beyond disturbing, underscoring the anxiety felt within Ukrainian leadership as they grapple with their reliance on American support. The need for a unified front with NATO allies is more critical than ever, especially as European nations prepare to bolster their military assistance to Ukraine in light of the shifting U.S. stance. The recent vote at the United Nations, in which the U.S. sided with Russia against a resolution condemning its actions in Ukraine, has further alienated Kyiv. This decision marks a significant fracture in the long-standing collective support Ukraine has traditionally enjoyed from its Western allies. Igor Luk's, a political expert, expressed his dismay, stating, "With a single vote, the highest authority of the country has allied itself with some of the most vile enemies of humanity." As Ukraine braces for potential further isolation, the stakes remain high. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine would not accept any peace deal that does not guarantee protection from Russian aggression. The urgency of maintaining a robust military and securing international backing cannot be overstated. Despite the dire circumstances, public sentiment in Ukraine remains resilient, with a significant portion of the population expressing a willingness to endure hardships for the sake of defending their nation. Looking ahead, the dynamics of the Russia-Ukraine conflict are poised for further evolution. With U.S. and Russian negotiators set to meet again soon, the risk of decisions about Ukraine's future being made without its input looms large. As Zelensky and his government navigate these treacherous waters, the necessity for sustained communication and a unified response from NATO allies becomes paramount. The unfolding events will not only shape the immediate future of Ukraine but also redefine the geopolitical landscape of the region for years to come.